Hey everybody, it's a very special week for myself as my little brother's getting married this weekend, but enough of that. We're here to talk some professional wrestling, and I am the Molson Canadian drinking, Tim Hortons eating, hardcore Canadian Peter H.
Well, I'm sure that your brother's wedding will be less insane than the wedding between Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. And that's one of many things that are insane in the wrestling business we can talk about with our special guest tonight, James Gutman. James, how are you doing, sir?
What is happening? Hey, for the record, there's nothing insane about Triple H is married to Stephanie. The rest of us are all insane. They're the only sane ones. That's the only sanity going on in the world, according to them, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. I guess that's one of those think Galoo galore. It's like anybody that thinks anything is wrong with what's going on, we're the crazy ones because they were just imbued with all this power, and it's just supposed to make sense.
Yeah, it wasn't that they had to push themselves on TV because they wanted to be the top stars of the show. It's that they just had to. I mean, how could you not? It was ingrained from God, like the Blues Brothers. They were on a mission from God, and that's where they landed.
Yes, indeed. And that's one of many things in that book that made me laugh. But I suppose before we get too obscure and give people references they may or may not know, we should delve a little bit into the background and give a little bit of the story of how you, James Gutman, became a published wrestling author. Let's get the background.
All right, backstory. Well, actually, it started 10 years ago, and it's actually 10 years ago this month coming up. At the end of September will be 10 years since I started with actually The Torch in 2002. I was with them for about 3 years, something like that. During the 2 years that I was with them, I started writing for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Did a lot of work with their different magazines. First book came out with WCW Press in 2005. Actually, 2006. I wrote it in 2005. World Wrestling Insanity. It was based on. I used to do the Raw Insanity reports. I still do them once in a while. Every Monday, I do this kind of insane Raw write-up. So the first book came out in 2006. Left to do my own site, WorldWrestlingInsanity.com. We opened ClubWWI.com 2006. The next year, 2007, 2006, which featured all the interviews that we had going on. So there's like hundreds of interviews up on that site. Second book came out in 2009. World Wrestling Insanity presents Shoot First, Ask Questions Later, and today I'm on the Angry Marks podcast. So that's pretty much my life story abridged for you guys.
Very cool. Now, I mean, I assume that when you first set out to write the book, you've even said this in the introduction to your book. You didn't think, "Hey, I'm out here to create something to destroy the wrestling industry." Far from it. You've been a fan of the programming your whole life, and your whole life. Whoa, I'm getting echo there. Sorry about that. But it's even something that came up. Like you can't explain to people that you're writing a book about wrestling because then they're like, "Well, why are you writing that?" It's like you're writing a book about dirt, or you're writing a book about something nobody can. It's like how do you explain to people that this is something serious? I mean, a lot of people still think of it as like a childhood thing that nobody at our age would take seriously.
Brother, I got to tell you, with professional wrestling, and I know that a lot of other industries, maybe they understand it, comics and things like that, it's one of the strangest industries because to people who don't follow wrestling, it's like you might as well be writing about, your toenails. Like they're like, what are you doing wrestling? Blah, blah, blah. But to people who follow wrestling, it's like the holy grail of life. Like there's very little middle ground with people who are like, yeah, I'm kind of okay with it. They either nothing to do with it or I love this. Especially nowadays when the business starts getting smaller and smaller, you start to find that you either find people who don't watch it at all or people who watch it and are like, how dare you say something bad about, it used to be Chris Benoit. I don't know who the new one is, Daniel Bryan or whoever's in Ring of Honor tomorrow. Those are all the guys that everybody seems to get. You guys know, you're the Angry Marks. So you know what makes Marks angry and they get pissed.
Yeah, and you're right. There's just really no room for subtle nuance these days. It's either you're in or you're out. You're part of the wrestling community, or you just don't follow it at all. Or you're the third category, which you address in the book, which is you used to watch wrestling, but you got tired of seeing the McMahon family soap opera every week, and you just stopped watching because you don't care anymore.
Everybody says it, man. One of the most said things that a lot of people hear is, "Yeah, I used to watch wrestling, before it got stupid." And I'm always like, "Yeah, thanks, that's great." I'm really glad to hear. It's always before it got. Well, when did it get stupid? When I stopped watching. All right, I guess we'll just leave it at that. But it's like, and what's kind of funny is, and I think Bobby Heenan had actually said this when I had him on for an interview. He had said to me that people always would say that, and then afterwards they'd be like, "Whatever happened to Jimmy Snuka?" Well, how the hell do you know who Jimmy Snuka is? You never watch wrestling. It's like, but for some reason, I guess people have to keep up the appearances. They never watch it, and then suddenly suddenly they remember, oh yeah, I did watch it a whole bunch of times, and now I have a million questions for this guy who just told me he likes wrestling. So now whatever happened to Junkyard Dog? You got to go through that for an hour.
Yeah, and it's like that whole myth that you talk about in the book that the wrestling business is cyclical. It's like, you know what? It's not cyclical. It's just sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's better written and sometimes it's poorly written. And when it's better written, surprise, surprise, more people are watching, and that's why we remember things like Hulk Hogan and Superfly Jimmy Snuka and the Junkyard Dog, because it was better written and more fun to watch.
Exactly. I'm telling you, man, everybody who says that, oh, it goes up and down, it's just the way that, nature is. Well, then number one, then why do you even have writers to begin with? What's the point if it's just going to go up and down anyway? But also, I should be able to go back now and watch a video of wrestling from like 2003 and wrestling from 1998 and not notice any difference in quality because, one was down, one was up, just because, just how life goes. It's this false narrative that's kind of put out there. And a lot of times the wrestling business likes to do it. And what's funny is when business is up, and people ask them about it being cyclical, they'll never say it is. Like, they never do. It's always like, well, that's not really true. I actually have a quote from Linda McMahon that said that the recession will not affect them. This was like 2001, 2002. It won't affect them at all because they're an entertainment industry and people tend to save money for entertainment, da-da-da. And then the recession really hit like a couple of years ago. And all of a sudden, well, every conference call, it's the recession is affecting us. And it's like, well, when it was up, it wasn't going to affect you. So that's what they do. They have a lot of built-in excuses that when things start to hit a snag, they like to kind of dig them out and tell you, no, it's not that the show's bad. It's that, you just don't simply understand why nothing's working.
And that's why I think in many ways this book is just as timely now as when it was written, because the early part of the book is all about deconstructing these myths. And one of the ones that I find really hilarious, and there's a lot of humor in this book, is when you talk about this myth that the reason the wrestling product isn't so good is because we have to write 6 hours of it every week. And why don't you people stop complaining because it's so hard to write 6 hours a week? Well, that monster has grown since you wrote the book. Now they're writing like 8 to 10 hours a week plus pay-per-views. So those excuses, if those are their built-in excuses, they must just be walking around the office preaching that evangel right now.
Crazy. You know what's crazy, man? It's like I always found it funny too that as fans we sit there and they would. I mean, seriously, that was one of their excuses of no other TV show goes through as much as we go through to be able to script all this stuff and da da da, and they compare themselves to these other TV shows, and it's like, you're selling me advertising. Like, you're not doing this for free. You're not doing 10, 15 hours of wrestling a week because, you just really like me and I like wrestling. And you're like, all right, let's do a whole bunch of shows for James because he deserves it. No, you want to sell advertising. You want to make money. So as fans, we have the same right to demand of them, look, if you're going to put on 10 hours a week, I want to enjoy those 10 hours a week. Don't just put crap on there just so you can get, sponsorship deals or whatever. Same thing with TNA and the rest of them. I think as fans for too long, we've been made to feel responsible for the content of what's on TV. We don't understand it, or, they're going through all these problems that we as fans don't simply get. It's not just about what's on TV. And, it kind of is what's about on what's on TV, because a lot of us are here because of something we saw on television at some point. It's all about the product.
Yeah, and I don't think those excuses really fly well when shows like NXT get canceled. It's not like they created the show, as you said, to make money on advertising, but then the network also ran the show because they wanted to make money on advertising.
Exactly.
And when they saw the ratings decline, they were like, "This isn't making money for us anymore. You can go peddle this somewhere else."
Exactly.
They need to write a better product, and then maybe people would stay tuned in, and everybody would make more money.
Exactly. Well, one of the things, too, about that first book was that, really the period when it was written was, it was a period in wrestling that I had never seen before. And what ended up happening was I think it really changed kind of the flow of how we had everything going, because I think people were still excited about the product around 2000 to 2001, right around when the invasion started. I always thought the invasion was kind of the end of all of it. A lot of people talk about like the end of the Attitude Generation, the quality decline and things like that. I think if there's an ending to that generation, it was definitely the invasion of WCW. Because I think, if you guys remember too, the whole Monday Night Wars was such a big part of wrestling. You know what I mean? And I always felt like when Vince bought out WCW and didn't follow it up, the only follow-up that he really did was 2 years later, a year and a half later, where he had, some mid-level WCW guys invade them with a completely new, logo on their shirts and things like that, things that made no sense and didn't have anything to do with WCW. I think a lot of fans that watched the Monday Night Wars the night that Vince bought WCW and didn't follow up immediately, I think they saw it as the end. You know what I mean? Like, they actually gave fans kind of an ending point where if you watch the Monday Night Wars play out, that night felt like the end, you know, and they all lived happily ever after. And you really didn't have a reason to watch after that. And when that happened, suddenly it was kind of carte blanche for this company. Around 2002 on, some of the stuff that they pulled between, I would say, '02 and '05, was just abysmal. And I think a lot of it was done on purpose because they still had enough, cred left with everybody because they had a good product in the late 90s, and they figured, all right, Triple H is in the family. Let's put him over like crazy. They might not like it now, but in 10 years, they're not going to remember how much they booed the situation or how unhappy they were with his overexposure. They're just going to know that he won the belt 125 times, so we'll just do that. And that's why I think today, even to this day, it still kind of affects them because they've never gotten back on that track ever since they entered the Monday Night Wars the way they did.